So my exams are finally done and I can finally get back into watching more movies. Does this mean more videos? Probably not. But I did manage to watch Weathering with You, which is a Japanese animated movie that came out in 2019, but got a global release early this year. But obviously not for South Africa, of course. I saw that this film was available on totally legal websites, so I decided to watch it, and I loved it. After watching it, I decided to watch some of Makoto Shinkai's other films. I rewatched Your Name, and I also watched 5 centimeters per second, but we're not talking about that one in this video. Today I'm here to compare Weathering with You to Your Name. Just a heads up before I start, just because I'm comparing them doesn't mean I think one is exceptionally better than the other. There will be a winner at the end of the video, but I do love both of these movies. It was actually a very tough decision to make because there are aspects of both of these movies that I really enjoy, but I believe one film achieves them greater than the other, and vice versa. I mean, I gave both of them a 4.5 on Letterboxd, and that's a really good score. Both of these films make me feel the same mix of emotions, and I thought it was necessary to compare them and decide which one I like that little bit better. And to be honest, I really needed a video idea because I'm procrastinating on Jurassic Park Part 2. But I'll stop rambling on. And let's get to the 1 versus 1. Your Name and Weathering with You consist of pretty much the exact same visual style, which is just the most utterly satisfying, beautiful, and just admiring thing to view. As their style is so similar, it's quite difficult to compare the two. The environments, the structure design, the color, and the flares in both films are outstanding, and just every single frame of animation in both films looks beautiful. But the animation and visuals in Weathering with You do feel more polished as it is a newer film, but the movie only really consists of primarily just really outstanding looking rain and weather. I think Your Name is definitely more creative with some of its visuals, and has the advantage as the film explores its visual style with far more locations and aspects than Weathering with You does. Rather than just buildings and the occasional location change, Weathering with You doesn't really explore its environments in the same way Your Name does. Weathering with You does use its disclosed location to its advantage, and it is done very well, but this just doesn't compare to the absolute beautiful locations that Your Name shows us. There is great attention to detail in both films, and they both are undeniably visually charming, but the winner of this round is Your Name. Both of these movies' scores are very, very good. Your Name's score is quite charming, but mostly forgettable in my opinion. Sure, there's that one song that's really iconic, but besides that song, I can't really remember much about Your Name's score. During the runtime, the score was good, and it did fit the film, but it just didn't quite grab my attention like the Weathering with You score. That Weathering with You score is so goddamn memorable. Most of the songs are still stuck in my head even after a few days, and I'm still constantly humming that song that played at the end of the movie. I think the score in Weathering with You just fits right into place with the visuals and the scenes, and in my opinion was much better than Your Name's score. It did a much better job in solidifying its place as a part of the story with the lyrics, much like what Your Name did, but I think was achieved better by Weathering with You and its score. So, the winner of this round is Weathering with You. The editing in Weathering with You feels slightly off to me. There was various times in which the film cut to black to end a scene, but the cuts felt weird. It felt like the scene had not fully ended yet, like there was still a bit of animation that could have played before the cut to black. The cuts felt like they interrupted the animation, at least in my opinion. Comparing this to Your Name's cuts to black that I believe were done perfectly, they felt purposeful and didn't really ruin the flow of the animation, which I felt that Weathering with You sometimes did. I definitely feel like the director tries to tell his stories presented in small chapters with these cuts, but as I said, the cuts in Weathering with You kind of feel like they ruin the flow, and that isn't for every single cut, but some of them do feel somewhat forced. Besides the well done cuts to black, I think Your Name definitely consisted of more unique transitions and cuts between locations and characters, compared to the mostly forgettable editing in Weathering with You. And maybe it's just easier to notice the editing in Your Name as I did watch it more recently than Weathering with You, but I'm just gonna trust my gun and say that Your Name's editing was better. So, the winner of this round is Your Name. For both movies, I can happily say that I was highly invested with the protagonists. I felt their struggles, their hardships, and the films did an excellent job in developing and forging these characters' relationships with one another. I loved their chemistry, I loved their story arcs, and their emotions were portrayed outstandingly. Both films consisted of two protagonists that I honestly can't decide which are better, but this section is about all the characters and not just the protagonists. All the main characters in Weathering With You are highly developed and feel purposeful within the story, and they had mostly satisfying conclusions to their arcs. Whilst with Your Name, I didn't really feel that sense of relation with most of the supporting characters. I think some of them are definitely underdeveloped and don't fulfill a proper arc. Your Name definitely pours all their efforts into making great protagonists, and if I had to choose a set of protagonists that I liked more, I think it would be Taki and Mitusha from Your Name, but overall I think Weathering With You does a better job with characterization in terms of all of the characters and their roles within the story. I feel the stakes for all the characters in Weathering With You, as I personally felt more invested in all of its main characters. But with Your Name, I only felt invested in the protagonists, and I definitely cared for them and their stakes, but not so much the others. All in all, I think Weathering With You's characters are far stronger and better developed than the characters in Your Name, making the winner of this round Weathering With You. Weathering With You tells the story of a boy who runs away to Tokyo and becomes friends with a girl who can manipulate the weather. Short and sweet. Your Name story is about two teenagers sharing a profound magical connection upon discovering they are swapping bodies, but things become more complicated when the boy and girl decide to meet in person. Short and sweet. Both are very generic stories, being the classic running away from home and experiencing a new world story, and the classic girl and boy swap bodies and have to live in each other's lives story. But both stories have such a unique way of shifting the formula and turning these generic stories into emotional, whimsical experiences. Both stories start with discovery and end with amazing payoffs. A few days ago I had a huge problem with the post-climactic ending sequences in both of these movies because I felt that they were way too long. A huge slow burn for an excellent payoff. But the more I thought about it, I actually appreciated the storytelling even more. There are elements of the stories that are told quickly and elements that dragged on, kind of like life. Life can be quick and slow, and sometimes it is that slow burn for that huge payoff. I still have my slight problems with elements of the stories, but they are both great stories. I think Your Name story is definitely more unique, but there are elements that felt very messy and difficult to understand, comparing it to the Weathering With You story that definitely does have some elements that seem non-realistic, but I think the story is more held together and consistent with its context and just flows better than Your Name's. This section was definitely the most difficult to choose a winner from, and I love both of these stories. But the winner of this round, becoming the final winner, is Weathering With You. I know I've said this a lot throughout the video, but I truly do love both films. This was a very difficult decision to make, and to be completely honest, in the future I could see myself liking Your Name more. It's all just dependent on my thoughts at the time, and at this point of time I think I like Weathering With You that little bit more. In a way, this film is kind of a reflection on the world today, and that's why I have this sense of relation to it at this point of time. The world right now does have this fantasy-like event that's affecting everyone, and all I can say is that I hope it gets better. I think we should all think on the bright side of things, because after all, the world has always been crazy out there. And I know that we'll be alright.